G'day Dark Realmers, it's horror author and illustrator Michael J. Elliott here with you again, and in today's episode of the Dark Realm Diaries we're going to be looking at some of the scariest horror and thriller television shows ever made from both the past and the present. Let's get started. Okay, Dark Realmers, well, most of you will probably be aware of Roald Dahl from his wonderful children's books including James and the Giant Peach, The Witches, and the perennial favourite, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But did you also know that he wrote adult fiction? And one of his best known works of fiction was his collection of short stories called Kiss Kiss, and I can thoroughly recommend that for a read. And this became the basis for the TV show Tales of the Unexpected. Now each week Roald Dahl would sit in front of the camera, in front of it, down in an armchair, and that was very much like how he used to write in real life. He basically used to have a very regimented routine where he'd make a thermos of tea, he'd take all his writing instruments and go down the garden shed, and he'd sit in a chair for hours just writing. And it was lovely the way the producers sort of picked up on that. But basically these TV series was very much based on his book Kiss Kiss. Now not all the stories were from that collection, but a lot of them were. Now two of them that really stuck in my mind, the first one was called William and Mary, and it was about a woman who'd just become a widow and her husband had been very overbearing, and at the reading of the will he's left all these conditions for her even though he's dead now, and he said, you are not to be remarried, get rid of the TV because I'm no longer there to watch it, don't smoke, don't drink, rah rah rah. Well, he'd volunteered to undergo this experimental treatment where he could basically have his brain kept alive, and his eye was hooked up to that so he could see everything that was going on. He couldn't talk, of course, and he couldn't hear, but he could see what everything was happening. And so the twist in the tale is that Mary is standing in front of his jar, you know, where his brain is, smoking away and puffing smoke into you know, the front of the canister, and you know, drinking away merrily, and you can see, you know, he's powerless to do anything, but you know, the bubbles of anger are going, and it was wonderful. And that's why it was called Tales of the Unexpected, because you never know what was going to happen, and Roald Dahl was brilliant at creating that wonderful twist at the end. Now another one that really stuck in my mind was called Royal Jelly, and it was about a beekeeper and his wife, and they just had a baby, and the baby was very, very sick. It wouldn't eat, it wouldn't take any nourishment at all, until suddenly it started having a little bit, then a little bit more, and soon it was putting on heaps and heaps of weight, and the mother was over the moon, and she said, oh, I wonder, you know, what's this miracle that's happened? And the husband says, well, you know, like I've been feeding, you know, putting royal jelly into her bottle, and royal jelly is what the queen bee feeds, or you know, all the infants, and it gives them strength and everything like that. And of course the mother gets very worried, and she said, oh my God, what have you done? What have you done? And then you look and see what the effect the royal jelly has had on this baby, and it will creep you out. Believe me, it's really brilliant. He was so good at writing those sort of stories, and that's why they're called Tales from of the Unexpected, Dark Realmers. Now here's a bonus fact. Roald Dahl was actually married to Patricia Neal, the actress. Now you may be thinking, well, I'm not familiar, who is Patricia Neal? Well, I'm sure lots of you know the original version of The Day the Earth Stood Still, and Patricia Neal uttered those classic words, Gort, Klaatu, Nikto, Barada, and that is what she's going to be famous for and remembered for, even though she was in lots and lots of movies. So check out Tales of the Unexpected. You can get the box set. It is available because I've checked. It's on Amazon and probably available from other retailers too. It's well worth sitting down and enjoying a marathon of Roald. Now, I was very late coming to the party discovering American Horror Story because I didn't get to see it till season 4. And when I first saw that serial killer freaky clown, that was it. I was hooked. And that storyline of Freak Show just captivated me. It was wonderful, very dark and gruesome. And American Horror Story has been consistently a high rater right from season 1, which was all about a family that move into a haunted house that's haunted by the former dead, or obviously dead, occupants, okay? And season 2 was all about an asylum for the criminally insane, which was run by a sadistic nun, Sister Jude. And then in that series, a young nun also gets possessed. And season 3 was about a coven of witches. Okay, season 4, as I said, which is my all-time favourite season, brilliantly directed and written. Season 5, Hotel, which actually starred Lady Gaga, because she replaced in some aspects Jessica Lange, who had been a mainstay in the series but wasn't going to continue on. Now, one thing American Horror Story is known for is its ensemble cast. It does have a regular cast, including Sarah Paulson, and so it's wonderful to see that cast, come together again season after season, but in very different roles, and it's a really great credit to them and their acting talent. Okay, now Hotel was quite scary because I was a bit dubious about Lady Gaga as an actress, but I have to admit she did this role really well. Apart from the fact that it suited her down to the ground, being this very glamorous hotel owner who happened to also have been a vampire. That just added to it, but that also had in it references to a house of horror where people were trapped in an ever-changing rooms and sliding walls and so forth. Well, that was actually based on a real life serial killer, and American Horror Story has actually been known for incorporating some actual real elements into its storylines. Now, in season 3, in Coven, Kathy Bates plays a woman who's resurrected from the dead. She was a slave owner and apparently a sadist, and she used to keep her slaves locked up and tortured and so forth. Well, that character Kathy Bates played was actually based on a real life figure from the time. Now, season 6 was set a bit like Paranormal Activity. I didn't enjoy season 6 because it was told in a documentary fashion about a couple who buy a home, and at first they think they're being driven out by the locals and so forth, but it didn't grab my attention. But having said that, it's a wonderful series. It's probably one of the darkest series on television anywhere in the world, and the writing consistency is brilliant. Now, many of you will have seen American Horror Story, but for those who haven't, each series is available on DVD in box set, and I do encourage you to check those out because it's one of the best horror stories, horror series that from the. Okay, Dark Realmers. Thriller was a British series that was made in the early 80s. And I was very, very lucky because I had a very progressive mum who let me sit up and watch those with her. And it was a religion for us to sit each week and watch those stories. They were just brilliant. And as the name implies, they were thrillers, not gross horror, not slasher, nothing like that. They were all thrillers, things with a twist, plots to make you think, races against time, those sort of things. Now, there were many, many stories in this series, but two that stick out in my mind. One was about two twin brothers, and one was an architect, and the other happened to be a psychopath. Well, the architect brother gets chatting to a lady who says, "Oh, look, I've just moved into a place I need. Can you advise me about knocking down a wall?" And he says, "Fine." Well, through circumstances, she actually ends up meeting the psychopath brother, thinking that it's the architect. And then the race is on to see, oh my God, are they going to find her? Is the sane brother going to get to this poor lady in time? That was the type of plot that you got with Thriller. Another one was about a woman, and she moved into this village, and because she had a broken leg, the townsfolk, who were all a bit creepy and weird, thought she was this woman who had been prophesied they'd come. Well, it turns out they're all devil worshippers, and one of the locals has got cloven feet, and you think, oh my God, is that the devil? Well, I won't go into that, but it explains it. And that was wonderful because, as I said, they were all very much built up tension. They gave you a sense of, oh, what's going to happen next, and that sort of edge of your seat wonder about the next scene, or what was coming up, or how it was going to resolve itself. Now, for my friend Amber, yes, I know I mention Amber a lot, but I always point out things that she would be able to enjoy. Now, Amber, you could watch this because, as I said, it's more a thriller, more psychological drama, not a lot of horror. In fact, I can barely remember any in it. And I'm sure you'd enjoy it. Now, for everyone else as well, Thriller is still available. It's a 16 DVD box set, and you would have a blast watching that. The episodes go for about an hour, 15 minutes, an hour and a half. Now, I recall it being about an hour and a half, but that may be because we saw it here in Australia on one of our commercial networks. So you add in the time for ads and so forth like that. So they're a really good, decent size or length for you to get your teeth into, Dark Realmers. And I'm a big fan of British drama, and the British do this very, very well. And the series was produced and also written, many of the stories were written by Brian Clemens, who is a well-known British screenwriter, and his mastery of the thriller really comes through on this. So check this out for yourselves. As I said, the box set's available, and for 16 DVDs, I think you're going to be well pleased. Now, Supernatural is in its 12th season, and when it hit season 11, it marked a milestone because it became then the longest running fantasy series on American television. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted, but for those of you who haven't seen Supernatural or only caught glimpses of it, it's basically the story of two demon hunting brothers, Sam and Dean Winchester. Now, not only do they hunt demons, but they hunt otherworldly ghosties and ghoulies and shapeshifters and so forth. But there's a great ensemble cast with this show too. Misha Collins plays Castile, who is a demon who's on Earth, and he's struggling with understanding humans and humanity. And there's also a wonderful performance by Mark A. Sheppard, who plays the Demon King Crowley. And there's something really wonderful about seeing this Englishman, very suave, as the King of Hell, basically. And we've seen some great storylines with this series too, Dark Realmers. First, of course, we had all the demon battles and so forth, but there was a war in heaven, and that series was wonderful because you had angels killing angels. It was basically a civil war, and you've got the two brothers stuck in the middle of it. Then you had a very similar thing happen when Lilith tried to take over Hell and upset Crowley. Now, here's a little bonus fact for you. Lilith is a figure don't quote me on this, but I think it's from Jewish mythology or Hebrew mythology, and she was said to have been Adam's first wife. Now, she wasn't unlike Eve, who was created from Adam's rib. She wasn't created from a part of Adam, and she refused to bow down and take orders from Adam, and therefore she was banished from Eden, and she became the mother of all demons. So in one way, I suppose you could say Lilith was like the world's very first feminist. Anyway, Dark Realmers, the series has had some brilliant moments. Now, there's sometimes I do get a little bit cheesed off. That's in a saying we have here in Australia, means a little bit, upset with it, where one brother does something that puts his life in danger, and the other brother, you're my brother, I'm not going to let you do this, and then it's all back and forward like that for a series, and that's been happening a while, and I think they could really get away from that, because we all know how it's going to resolve now. One brother will save the other brother, and it might result in will the world end, blah blah blah, all that sort of thing. But I do give credit to the writers because they have managed to keep it original. Now, that's very hard, season after season, but they've managed to do it. And they've introduced, as I said, some wonderful characters in the form of angels and the Demon King. And it'll be interesting to see how long the series can keep going, because, of course, it all depends on how long the stars want to stay with it too, Dark Realmers. Okay, Dark Realmers, now I'm sure many of you are well versed or very familiar with Rod Serling's most famous television series, The Twilight Zone, which was wonderful. Now, The Twilight Zone was primarily science fiction, but he went on to make another series called Night Gallery, which was primarily horror and thriller. And it just remains one of my favourite shows. I didn't get to see a lot of it. Now, I saw one on commercial TV here in Australia when I was very young, or quite young, and I never found out whether it was a Night Gallery actual movie or the network I'd watched it on had just strung a few episodes together. But I've been desperate to find it ever since. So if you do find it for me, Dark Realmers, please leave a description or a link for me in the comments. Now, in Night Gallery, Rod Serling very cleverly used to stand in front of a painting or a piece of art each week and introduce it and the story behind it. Now, in the movie or the 4 episodes I saw, there were some really wonderful stories in this. Now, the first one involved a man who inherited a house or did something shady to get this house, and there's a painting on the stairwell of the house and the neighbouring graveyard. Well, every time he goes past, the picture changes, and you see the graveyard, you see the dirt being on top of the grave, then you see the grave and the coffin, and then so forth and so forth. And this image changes till there's someone about to knock on his door, and that is absolutely terrifying. In another great story, there's an ex-Nazi, and he visits the art gallery. Now, he doesn't know he's being pursued by, an ex-concentration camp victim, a Holocaust survivor, who's found out who he really is. Now, for some reason, this Nazi has this way of picturing himself going into the image, and there's a beautiful picture of a man fishing on a lake, and he pictures himself there and he magically transports himself there. Well, as the story progresses, this Holocaust survivor gets closer and closer, and in a desperate attempt to escape, the Nazi, please let me into the picture. Well, the ending is just brilliant, absolutely wonderful. I'll just say poetic justice, that's all I'm going to say, but it's wonderful. Then in another story, which stars Joan Crawford and Buddy Hackett. Now, Joan Crawford plays this blind woman who's fabulously wealthy, and she's paid Buddy Hackett $10,000 for his corneas or his eyes, or I can't remember the exact details. But in fact, what will happen is it will make Buddy Hackett permanently blind, but Joan Crawford will get to see, and with this experimental treatment, she'll only get to see for an hour, but she thinks it's worth any price. And the doctor tries to say to Buddy Hackett, look, are you sure you want to do this? And he goes, hey, $10,000 is a lot of money, I've seen everything I want to see, And then talk about irony. Just as they're about to, or they just unbandage Joan Crawford's eyes, there's a power blackout throughout the city, and it progresses from there. It's a wonderful series. As I said, there are 3 of the stories that stick out in my mind, and as I said, I've never known to this day whether it was a Night Gallery movie or just a few episodes strung together. But if any of you know where I can obtain the whole series, please let me know. And not just for me, I think you'd love it too, because Rod Serling, one of the things I loved about him, he had that wonderful voice for television. And we all remember the introduction to the Twilight Zone, don't we? His voice and that wonderful creepy music. And Night Gallery was very similar, but as I said, it dealt with horror and it dealt with thriller. Alfred Hitchcock, so if you can get hold of that, 1955 to 1965, really, and it's getting voted as one of the best TV top 100 television shows of all time. It didn't go as long as Time Magazine, and it wasn't as successful as the Twilight Zone. Music was called Death March of a Marionette, still a wonderful, and it was suggested that Alfred Hitchcock used this by his longtime friend and composer Bernard Herrmann, who was also the composer for the chilling music in Psycho. And the famous silhouette cartoon that shows a silhouette of Alfred Hitchcock was actually drawn by himself. Now, a lot of the stories cashed in on the popularity of the literary anthologies that were under the name of Alfred Hitchcock, or collected by Alfred Hitchcock, and some of them were just purely adapted for TV. Now, there are two stories that stick with me, and this really demonstrates the wonderful way Alfred Hitchcock presented things and could write things. Now, he was called the master of suspense, and that's for no small reason. He often said, and he gave an example, if you simply show a bomb on a bus and then the bus blowing up, there's no suspense. But if you show that bomb ticking away and then you cut to people getting on the bus and then you cut back to the bomb and you see people getting off and you build it up, you are creating so much tension that you have created this suspense. And he did this brilliantly. Now, one of the stories was, I think it was either called Bang Bang or Bang Bang You're Dead. And it's about a little boy who finds his father's gun, and he's playing cowboys, or he's dressed up as a cowboy. And he goes around pointing these guns at various people. And throughout this whole episode, you're petrified. You're wondering, who is he going to shoot? What's going to trigger him? No pun intended, of course, okay? And it's a brilliant example of tension and suspense, and something that Alfred Hitchcock himself would have been absolutely delighted with. And in another one, which is more black comedy than anything else, it's about a murder, and a detective is investigating this murder, and he's very much suspects a wife committed, but he can't find any evidence, there's nothing. And she invites him around for dinner. Well, the ironic thing and the black comedy of this is that the detective doesn't realise he's eating the murder weapon, because she murdered her husband with a frozen leg of lamb. And there you go. Brilliantly, deliciously evil. Now, there were 6 complete seasons of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and they're on DVD, and that's available from Amazon. Now, you can check those out. Now, they also made a remake of that, and I think that was NBC, America NBC made that in 1985, which was a remake of some of the stories, and also some of the introductions by Alfred Hitchcock in the original series were just recolorized. Now, it only lasted 1 season on that network, but it did get picked up by another network and went for a few more years. But as they often say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and you can't beat the original and the best. And you will love this, Dark Realmers, especially if you are a little bit tired of television today and the way how everything is. There's very little suspense and everything is served up to you so you don't have to think too much, Alfred Hitchcock doesn't do that. He's a master. He was the master of making you think and getting you on the edge of your seat. So take a trip down memory lane and get yourself this, Dark Realmers. Okay, Dark Realmers, now there are 5 seasons of Bates Motel, and I have to admit I'm currently only up to season 3. Now, the basic plot of Bates Motel is it's set well before Psycho, and it's transformed to modern day, whereas Psycho obviously was contemporary at the time it was filmed. And it stars Freddie Highmore as Norman Bates and Vera Farmiga as his mother Norma, and a great ensemble cast. I have to give praise to the writers and the actors, because they have really portrayed the mental deterioration of Norman Bates extremely well, and Freddie Highmore gives a brilliant performance as Norman Bates. Vera Farmiga is brilliant as Norma, his mother, who is very controlling, very cloying, and their relationship has gotten to a stage where Norman can't bear to be away from his mother, and sometimes they sleep together, not sexually, but they sleep together, and that's where you get this really creepy feeling coming through. Now, there are a lot of plots and twists in this, but one of the problems I have with this series, okay, it's meant to be in a small town called White Pine Bay, and there are 2 families or 2 interests that have this massive drugs operation that are supposed to be the lifeblood of the town since logging closed down. Well, the size of this operation would make a Mexican drug lord blush, and I have problems with it. Okay, yeah, I can understand that, but it just seemed a bit too over the top. Coupled with the fact that Vera seems to meet someone new, have sex with them almost every second episode, while you've got the sheriff who's sort of like slowly getting to be attracted to her and so forth, okay? So I get pulled out of the moment quite a bit with this series. But for me, the highlights are when Norman actually, turns or actually, has these blackouts where he can't remember. Now, throughout the series, there are murders that Norman commits, but he's got no knowledge of because he's in another mental state. But in the last series, there's a wonderful scene where Norma has basically left the house and Norman's not coping at all. Well, his stepbrother, Dylan, wakes up in the morning to find Norman at the oven cooking breakfast, and he's saying, "Hi, honey, sit down. Why don't you get your brother up?" And that's when he realises that that's not Norman. Mentally, it's Norma, their mother, and the fact that Freddie Highmore's dressed in her robe and acting like his mother gives you an indication of how things are going to progress with the series. And it's nice in the fact that it sets it up so that you can see, when you watch Psycho again, you can see how Mother never actually died. She's always with Norman. She's actually a part of him, and as it says at the end of Psycho, there's basically no Norman Bates anymore. As I said, I do have some problems with the series, with characters sort of falling in love at the drop of a hat, and this whole corrupt, it's almost like one of those true life sort of mafia stories where this small town is overwhelmed by corruption that would make a big city sort of be envious, okay? But if you can put that aside, just concentrate on the relationship between Norma and her son. The psychological aspects of the show are really, really well done, okay? And as I said, there's 5 series of Bates Motel, So the fifth one has just been announced, or at the time I've made this, it's just been announced, and that's going to be the final series. Okay, but it's become, for the network that's screening it, it's become its longest running originally scripted television show. So check that one out for yourselves, Dark Realmers. Well, Dark Realmers, there was a few more series I wanted to do reviews on, but look, honestly, this will turn into longer than Ben-Hur if I do that. But I want to give a couple of honourable mentions. One is to a brilliant series, one of my favourites, The Night Stalker, or Kolchak, The Night Stalker, starring the late, great Darren McGavin, who played a newspaper reporter who always uncovered really weird things going on, you know, supernatural things, monster things, and each week it was a battle for him with his editor to let him go with the story. And of course, always at the end, the mystery got solved, but of course he couldn't print it, his editor wouldn't allow it. That was just brilliant. That's available on DVD too, Dark Realmers. Another one is that I'm sure you're all familiar with, unless you were born, you know, like really, really recently, is Tales from the Crypt, which is really, but based on, you know, some of it based on comic series that was around Tales of the Crypt. And who can ever forget the wonderful lead character, or the introduction, that the Crypt Keeper. Wonderful, just very tongue-in-cheek, very you know, sort of black humour, but the actual series, they actually went on and made sort of Tales of the Crypt sort of movies, and you can find those available to stream or to buy. And the last one I want to mention is a little local production from the 1973 called A Touch of Evil, and this was an Australian series. And why it's unique is because our television industry was still very young. We only got television in 1956, Dark Realmers. Now, a lot of you will go, whoa, and we only have, you know, 3 commercial channels, and we've got digital channels now too, but 3 commercial channels and 2 government-run channels, okay? And this was a production by the Channel 9 network, and they managed to lure some international stars out here. And it was all set in Sydney, but the setting was meant to be the USA. And basically, you had guest stars like Ray Walston coming out and doing spots. And the series itself was hosted or introduced by the wonderful Anthony Quayle. And he would introduce the story. Then at the end, he would basically say, and remember, there is a touch of evil in all of us. And then he'd turn around and begin to walk off stage. Then he'd turn back and say, pleasant dreams. It was a wonderful series. Unfortunately, I've researched thoroughly. It's not available on DVD. But I don't know whether you may be able to find that on a streaming service somewhere in the States or overseas, because it was internationally sold and sold to American networks. So they may have the rights to stream it, but check that out for yourselves, Dark Realmers, okay? Because I'm sure you'll enjoy those. Okay, Dark Realmers, that's it for our look at TV series of horror, thriller, scary, both past and present. I hope you've enjoyed it. Now, I know some of you will probably think, hey Mike, you didn't mention Program Y or Series X. Well, a couple of reasons for that is, Dark Realmers, that I only have access to 2 forms of television. One is Netflix, and Netflix Australia doesn't show everything that's on America, and the other form is commercial TV here in Australia. And once again, we don't get everything that's screened from America. Now, there's some shows like Penny Dreadful I would have loved to have watched myself, but that's only available on our pay TV service here in Australia called Foxtel. But, you know, hopefully I might be able to get that on DVD and look at it if we do another part of this. So I hope you've liked this. Let me know what you thought of my choices. Also, if you've got a favourite TV show from now or the past, leave a comment here and let the other Dark Realmers know what your favourite show is, okay? And if you've just recently tuned into the Dark Realm Diaries, don't forget, please subscribe to us because we love having you with us for our content. Everything from the world of horror we love, books, movies, trivia, myths and legends from around the world, anything scary and dark, we're into it, okay? Well, that's it. As I said, Dark Realmers, I hope you've enjoyed this week's video. And as I always say to you, Dark Realmers, stay in the light. Bye for now.